back to Van. What would you like to talk about first today, Brittney?
We're going to be talking about the primary elections here in Vermont. Yeah, we're going to jump into who won for which parties and talking a little bit. We listened to the debates, and so giving our take on where we thought it was going to go, where it actually went. It'll be great. The winner of the Democratic primary for governor.
Gubernatorial race, as they call it. In the biz. Gubernatorial.
It's not gubernatorial, it's gubernatorial?
I thought it was gubernatorial. What a fucking weird-ass word. Like, why do we use this in elections? I don't know.
What does gubernatorial mean?
Gubernatorial means relating to a state governor or the office of state governor.
Alright, it's pretty self. So, the gubernatorial candidate for the Democratic primary is officially David Zuckerman! David Zuckerman with 50% of the vote. The GOP gubernatorial candidate is Phil Scott. Nobody was...
Yeah, no one questioned that.
Phil Scott sweeping in with 73% of the vote. Do you want to say the progressive person?
The progressive, we can talk about him, but I don't really think it's important to actually have him up front because the Progressive Party was literally like, don't vote for them, vote for Zuckerman. But, you know, the winner of the Lieutenant Governor Democrat race is Molly Gray with 46% of the vote. Well, the winner of the Lieutenant Governor's race on the GOP side was
Scott Milne.
Scott Milne. He won with 52% of the vote.
Yeah, so the debates happened like 3 weeks ago?
Between three and 4 weeks ago, I think, yeah.
And I will say, for someone who thinks politics is batshit crazy, the debates were batshit crazy. The Democratic debates were a waste of time, and the GOP debates were eye-opening, but also a waste of time.
Yeah, it's kind of sad, the structure of the debate. They didn't really give a lot of time for the candidates to talk about policy, which, I mean, in our debate, what can you expect? But just the structure of asking them questions and then having the candidates ask each other questions. And then the best part was when actual Vermonters asked the questions. Those were when they actually gave their best answers. The whole thing should have been Vermonters asking them questions. It should have been the whole thing, because that was the best part of the debates.
The first 40 minutes of all 4 different debates, giant waste of time.
Yeah.
The Democrats were like, not even talking about like policies. Ooh, are you even supposed to be running for governor or lieutenant governor?
Do you have the experience to run for governor?
Do you even know what my plans were when I was in office? Do you even know what I voted on?
The whole Molly Gray thing where her eligibility, I'm still not sure if she's eligible, which honestly I don't care.
She lived out of the country.
And out of the
Switzerland. Out of the state. Like, she was a resident of a different
Mm.
country for like 2 years, but it was less than 4 years ago.
Which you have to have lived in Vermont for 4 years to run for office.
Consecutively. The 4 years prior to you running, you had to have lived in Vermont. And that is up for question.
And they brought it up in the debate, and it wasted a big chunk of the debate when they could have been talking about actual policy and how to make Vermont a better place. Like, that's where the Democrats do so bad in Vermont. I'm for what you want. I care about the things you care about, but not actually getting into the actual like details or minutia of what they want to do while they have their positions.
Yeah. And yeah, a lot of it was like, I've done this. And it's like, great, cool, you've done these things, but what are you going to do? We're asking you to do these things, which might be different from what you've done in the past, or might be complete, opposite of what you think you should do. Like, tell us what you're actually going to do, not talk about what you have done and then attack other people. Why are we talking about this during the debate? You should have put this on the press. Like, you should have done.
It wasn't for the defense. It wasn't in the press. I forget what Vermont newspaper it was on, which, my bad, but I know it was in the newspaper. And I didn't even think Molly was going to win. Like, honestly, personally, I was a much bigger fan of Brenda Siegel. I like what she stood for and what she talked about.
The whole time, she was one of the only people who actually got into, like, she didn't really get into this is what I'm going to do, but she was the one who was like, this is what needs to happen, like, we need to talk about this. She was talking about paid family leave, she was talking about childcare, she was talking about education.
And she brought up broadband.
Broadband. Everyone else is just like, what do you know about me? Or, you're not supposed to be here.
Honestly, I'm surprised that Molly Gray won because her outreach game was awful. I didn't start seeing things on Facebook for her until a few weeks ago when I was seeing Brenda's way earlier and Tim Ash way earlier. I got mostly just messages from Debbie, like calls being like, I'm Debbie Ingram and this is what I believe in. And I'm like, good, but you just, like, your webpage sucks. Like, I appreciate the text messages where people actually text you back. I mean, Molly's campaign did text me, I think the day of the election. I was like, I'm not even gonna respond to you. Like, too little too late. Like, you lost my vote.
The Republican debates for the lieutenant governor, those were like, they were actually talking about substance, but again, I don't agree with anything the Republicans say.
It was bad.
So. They also had, listen, Dana Colson, you're a racist.
Yeah, Dana Colson is a racist, and I hope he can see this one day and he can know we think you're a racist for what you said in the debates to Meg Hansen.
Yeah, asking Meg Hansen, like, one, just implying that she's not, like, he was really into a native Vermonter. Like, I'm from Vermont, like, native. One of the questions that when people get to ask, like, when candidates get to ask each other questions, one of his questions to her was,
given the recent news article on Molly Gray, I did a little research and found some interesting information. So I'd like to ask Meg, have you lived in any other state in the last 4 years?
Thank you for the question, Dana. I moved to the Upper Valley 10 years ago. Windsor was my home, and I've been a full-time resident of Vermont over the last 10 years. I paid my taxes. This is where I have my license. No, my home has been Vermont for the last 10 years.
And it's such a trope for people of color being like, are you from here? Do you live here? Do you belong here because you're not white? Like, come on, get the fuck out of here. There was one candidate in the GOP lieutenant governor's race that we did like. He, unfortunately, did the worst. His name was Jim Hogue. He only got 3% of the vote. But he had the most interesting concepts. He brought up the idea of a state bank, which I think would be a smart move for Vermont and should be something that should be looked in by Vermonters and by our legislature. I think it was a smart thing to talk about, and it caught my interest as a young Vermonter. He had some weird takes on COVID, which I didn't appreciate, and it's one of the reasons I could not vote for him, obviously, because anybody who thinks COVID's bullshit or anything, you're not a serious person.
his takes on cannabis were, I believe, pretty good.
And probably better than most of the Democrats,
Yeah,
honestly.
honestly.
He said that we should legalize it and leave it alone. And that's what I think. Cannabis is a beautiful market that could bring in a lot of tax revenue for Vermont. The way the Democrats want to use that tax money is, in my opinion, foolish. They should legalize it and let growers, sellers treat it like alcohol as much as possible. There's nowhere near as bad as alcohol, and or other substances that people choose to use.
And I think there's just a whole other facet outside of it using as a recreational substance that, like, there's a literal, like, group at UVM who just looks at cannabis research, and, like, we need to focus on those things too, because there are so many other uses for cannabis, or hemp even. Like, we should be using these so much differently than we are, and there's so many opportunities. We just need to be given the space to take those opportunities.
And that has to do with the federal government. We need it to be brought down from a Schedule 1 substance. I don't think it'll happen either, but, you can always hope. On the Democratic side, there was only 2 real candidates, Zuckerman and Holcomb. On the other 2...
Wait, don't tell me. Let me see if I can guess.
Yeah, okay, go.
CORBO
Yes.
and...
I'll give you a hint. It is... First part is like something when the air moves a lot.
Wind?
And
Windburn?
And then, yeah, there you go. It's Windburn, yeah. Yeah.
God.
They,
No idea. Only remember Corbo because he literally says, opening remarks, they ask every candidate, what are you doing here? Like, why do you want to be governor? And his response, Corbo, is...
Well, basically, this campaign was something that I embarked on out of a necessary reluctance to bring some issues to the forefront that generally get ignored. Other than that, I'm not in any way ambitious for office.
I don't want to be governor. I'm just here to ask questions for the people.
Are you ever even taking this seriously?
He did have an air of, I'm literally just here to be a name.
Good for you.
Yeah, he was running for a bunch of different spots. He ran in the...
Against Welsh.
Welsh.
Against
for
Peter
the
Welsh.
seat, for the House seat?
Yeah, for House of Representatives. All our federal representatives, Welsh, Leahy, Sanders, they're all extremely popular in this state. And to beat them, you need more than, hey, I'm going to have my name on the ballot here, but I'm also running for governor.
Yeah, the Dem side of that debate, the governor's debate, I guess Zuckerman really was... The only reason why is because I know who he is, and everyone else I didn't know who they were, and I didn't really connect with anything that anyone was saying. And, like, all I remember really from the debate was... Everyone went off about vaccines against Tim Ash in the lieutenant governors and against Zuckerman.
Since the beginning of this campaign, you failed to clarify your record. Instead, you've claimed that vaccines should be free and accessible, which they already are because we are a universal vaccine state. Are you ready to take responsibility for the fact that your history on this issue actually undermines the public health of Vermonters?
I also want to thank you for allowing me to clarify this question due to the misrepresentation of my position, which you've been perpetrating now for months, even though I've been very clear in many debates with respect to this issue. I've not been unclear. I support vaccines and I will follow medical professionals' advice on making COVID-19 vaccine mandatory. So I want to clarify that I voted for removing the philosophical exemption, even though in your representation, you've distorted my views. I certainly hope that after clearing this up over many debates, including this one, that you'll not continue to misrepresent my views in debates, TV ads, or social media. You can continue to distort one statement from 20 years of public service where I've earned the trust of Vermonters to stand up for what Vermonters need. I'm going to leave it at that because my record stands for itself.
And he was like, I just explained myself 2 seconds ago. I'll explain myself again. Please stop asking me these questions.
Yeah.
You know my answers. You know where to find it. So Stop.
Talk about issues Vermonters actually care about. I mean, especially in the primary, like, set yourself apart. Come up with a plan that's actually going to change Vermonters' lives. Anything. Something that's not already talked about a bunch. Talk about rent and how rent is so crazy.
Out of all the debates, I think the Republican governor's debate was the most batshit crazy.
That's the exact word to use it. Batshit crazy. That's
was
exactly what I was
insane.
thinking. It made me laugh so much when I was driving around listening to it.
The biggest takeaway was that every single person was like, Phil Scott, what's your answer to this question? Phil Scott.
Yeah, fuck you, Phil Scott, fuck you. And
And it
he's
was
the
like-
only one up there with, like, good answers
Yeah.
and being like, I'm an actual adult. Get out of here, kids.
At one point, the moderator said, hey, can you please abide by the times? And he's like, these conversations are more important than a 45-second time limit.
And he's not wrong. He's
Yeah.
not wrong at all. And he did it with such class. He has such a way with himself. Like, I am by no means on the right or Republican. I'm firmly on the left. But I respect Scott to no end for what he has done in our state surrounding COVID and the mature response that he has had, unlike so many other Republican governors and obviously our president.
Coming into just like opening of schools in that conversation, we're getting into a little touchy area. His initial response is why Vermont is at the bottom of the list of, cases, deaths in the last 30 days, all of that stuff that happened a few weeks ago. Like, his response is part of the reason why we are in a good place. I think that people are taking that as, it's that classic thing where it's like, oh, we're doing so good, so then there's nothing to worry about now.
I'm
And
not
it's
gonna
like,
wear my mask.
it's like, we are in this place because of the action we've taken. And then you going against those actions or like reverting back to the original, completely just draw back exactly the response we didn't want in the first place.
There is a couple Republicans I would like to talk about. Mostly the runner-up to Scott, who had the best chance of beating him. I wasn't really worried that Vermonters were going to vote for him. The Vermonters that did, the 12,000 of them, the 22.17% that voted for John Clark, I'm sorry that you have voted for him, probably for his takes on gun rights, because you're pissed at Scott for signing that bill.
I mean, I don't want to get too far into it because I do not want to give this man a platform at all.
He doesn't deserve one. He's an awful man. He's a pastor, but he shouldn't be because he doesn't believe in God. He is a Christian nationalist. He believes in using the Word of God and what he thinks is right and wrong to influence people. He believes in controlling other human beings to do what he wants. That's not what Christ or God is supposed to be about. Not that I'm an expert or anything. I only grew up in the Roman Catholic Church, but no humble brag. Final analysis of him is I'm glad that he didn't become the Republican nominee. Not that I ever doubted that Scott was going to win. The thing that is most important in an election is name recognition. And Scott has plenty of it, doing his press conferences twice a week. I never thought John Clark even stood a chance of beating Scott. He's run before, he'll probably run again, and that's the trick to politics, is you need to run. And eventually, every time you run, you get more name recognition and you have a better chance of winning. The dangerous thing about John Clark is there will be more elections and he will run again, because it seems to be a thing he likes to do. When Scott finally is out of office, when he finally decides to step down, he could be the nominee for the Republicans, and that will be a scary day. He is an extremist, he is a lunatic, and he deserves to be nowhere near power. Like I said earlier, I'm nowhere near I'm not on the right, and it's obvious that Scott is, and I don't know if it is his policies or if it is the demographics of Vermont being so spread apart and small. I'm just happy that we have a competent human in leadership in Vermont. Even though he's a Republican, he is a moderate. I appreciate the way he has run the state for the last 4 years.